Hey, all right. I want to go over this little article by Gene Lance. It's called "Why Study Marxism." It's on his little school of Marxism. So the first lesson on the ABCs of Marxism by Gene Lance. So I want to read this quote right here. First off, he starts off with this really cool quote: "Man's dearest possession is life, and since it is given to him to live but once, he must so live as to feel no torturing regrets for years without purpose. So live as not to be seared with shame of a cowardly and trivial past. So live that dying he can say, all my life and my strength were given to the finest cause in the world, the liberation of mankind." So, that's why we study Marxism, number one, because Marxism is an ideology to liberate mankind, liberate all of humanity. So, what could be greater than that? What life purpose can be greater than the liberation of mankind? So, that's why we study Marxism. So, I'm going to keep reading through this and I'm going to talk about it as I go. Understanding our world is necessary before we can seriously undertake to improve it. Marxist philosophy enhances our ability to understand. Marxism goes far beyond what is commonly accepted and common sense. So the main answer to why study Marxism is because it will increase your understanding and your ability to affect change. As an added value, Marxism relieves us a lot of the pain, alienation, self-doubt, and helplessness the capitalists voice upon us. So yeah, Marxism helps us understand the world around us, okay? So it helps us understand the world. And before you can change the world, you have to understand the world, okay? So I got this quote by Fidel Castro. He says, "Marxism taught me what society was. I was like a blindfolded man in a forest who doesn't know where north or south is. If you don't eventually come to truly understand the history of class struggle, or at least have a clear idea that society is divided between the rich and the poor, and that some people subjugate and exploit other people, you're lost in a forest, not knowing anything." That's from Fidel Castro's book, My Life. So his autobiography, his spoken autobiography. So yeah, if you don't understand that society is divided by the rich and the poor, and that some people oppress and exploit each other people, like you said, you're lost in the forest, not knowing anything. So that's what you got to understand. That the rich get rich because they exploit the poor. The rich in the world, generally, they have gotten rich in capitalism because they exploit and oppress the poor. Okay? So that's why we study. That's one thing. That's what Marxism teaches you. And also, it's a history. It's a class struggle. That there's a class struggle going on. That there's the owning class, and then there's the working class, and the owning class gets rich by oppressing the working class. Okay, and they're fighting against each other. They're constantly struggling against each other. So that's basically Marxism for beginners. Studying Marxism is fundamentally easy and natural. The main barrier to understanding is the constant storm of capitalist ideology that assaults us from every corner. It permeates virtually all of our culture, from advanced college classes, to the lowest TV cartoons. Capitalists own virtually all the media, all the book publishers, all the movie studios, all the schools, and all the television networks and stations. Virtually all the pundits and philosophers are on their payrolls. So yeah, capitalists, they own the media. All the main corporate media, you got CNN, you got NBC, MSNBC, ABC, CBS, even PBS, Fox News, all that stuff. I don't know if I'm forgetting anyone. It's all owned by the rich. It's all corporate media. It's all owned by the capitalists. It's capitalist media. The capitalist ruling class owns that media. So they're feeding you their ideology constantly. They're feeding you their ideology that justifies this system based on oppression and racism and poverty and exploitation and war. It's just propaganda that they're feeding you that justifies and rationalizes the system. Like, for instance, in school, I'm a teacher, they say, capitalism equals democracy and socialism, or no, communism equals dictatorship. Capitalism equals democracy, communism equals dictatorship. That's a capitalist lie. That's what the capitalists themselves told you. But you repeat it constantly over and over again, and you think you thought it up yourself. But no, the capitalists told that to you, and they brainwashed that to you ever since you were a kid. They brainwashed that, or they hammered it into your brain ever since you were a kid. But, yeah, so actually it's the opposite. The capitalism is on a collision course with democracy. But anyway, that might be getting too off topic right now, so I'll just continue on. So from the time we are born, we learn from the capitalists themselves that what exists today has always existed and will never change. We learn that you can't fight City Hall. The more things change, the more they stay the same. We learn that cooperation is impossible and that life is a jungle. We learn that war and poverty are natural, if not actually good for us. And that we live in the best of all possible worlds. So yeah, that stuff. The more things change, the more they say the same. That's a capitalist lie, because that's actually scientifically false. Things change all the time. Things are constantly changing all the time. It's not more things change, the more they stay the same. That's not science. Science says that things are changing all the time. You're constantly growing. You're constantly getting older. You're constantly changing. Things are always in the state of being born and dying out and withering away. So just like I said, you are born, you grow up, you get older and older, and then you die. So things are changing all the time. Nothing ever stays the same. But capitalists say these things like you can't fight City Hall. Life's a jungle. It's just, like you said, war and poverty are natural. This is natural. Human beings just fight. It's just natural. Like, you can't change it. It'll never change. Or they say racism is natural. Racism, because people are always competing against each other. Racism is natural. So that's capitalist lies. It's not true. It's a product of capitalism. This system based on oppression. This system that we're born into, which is based on oppression and exploitation. Okay? So we learn that stuff. We learn these capitalist lies constantly. Basically, almost everything you hear from the mainstream media, from the schools, mostly from movies and stuff too, TV shows, it's capitalists telling you their ideologies. So anyway, teaching you their ideology and making you believe it. An unnatural state of alienation and distrust is forced upon every one of us by those who control our information sources. It doesn't take a great intelligence to see through the capitalist mist, but it may take a small amount of courage. Yeah, so we're alienated. So, like I said earlier, it helps us relieve the alienation that capitalism foists upon us. Like, for instance, human beings are alienated. We're separated from each other, and we're separated from our labor. That's the concept of alienation. So the concept of alienation that Marxism teaches, it's about how workers they produce all the value in the world, but the capitalists expropriate the majority of the value that the workers produce. So they get rich by exploiting the labor of the working class. And we're separated from our community, and we're separated from each other. And that's what capitalism is about. It's private ownership over the means of production and private profit making. The capitalists make private profits off of the exploitation of the working class. Okay? So they make private profits as a result of exploiting the working class. The working class made iPhones. The workers built the roads. The workers built the buildings. The workers built all the value in the world. But somehow, under capitalism, the capitalists take most of the value that the workers make, and that's how they get rich. While the workers are left to keep working and to keep getting exploited by the capitalists. So that's kind of the concept of alienation. So also it says it doesn't take a great amount of intelligence to see through the capitalist mist, but it may take a small amount of courage. So yeah, it takes courage to fight this system, to try to fight the system and try to struggle against the system. A lot of people don't do it just mainly because they're too cowardly, or they're intimidated, or they're afraid of what other people will think, or they're afraid that they might lose a job or something like that. So it takes a lot of courage to fight capitalism and to struggle against capitalism, to struggle against oppression, to struggle against racism, colonialism, and imperialism, and war. It takes courage because these are very powerful forces that we're fighting. Some have said that this is the most powerful empire ever in the history of the world that we are struggling against. But if the people are united, the people can win, because it's true that there are way more of us, the people and the workers and the oppressed around the world. There are way more of us than there are the capitalist ruling class, the capitalist imperialist ruling class. There are way more of us who can fight for a system based on the liberation of humanity, to fight for power in the hands of the people and the workers. So we study Marxism because we recognize our own humanity. We care about what happens to our brothers and sisters. We recognize suffering and we want to change. The Marxist school can only improve from your participation and feedback. Please join in the collective effort. So yeah, we study Marxism because we recognize our own humanity. We care about our sisters and brothers. We recognize suffering and we want change. So yeah, we recognize the suffering. Well, it's just like the George Floyd killing. Everybody sees the George Floyd killing and they're like, by the police, and they say that's wrong, that should not happen. Or we see people who are poor, we see people who are homeless, or we see people around the world that are victims of war, like in the Middle East, who get bombed by the United States. We see countries around the world that are getting sanctioned by the United States and that suffer because of U.S. imperialism. So we see this and we care, and we want to stop it. We want to help. We want to help people who are suffering. We want to stop the suffering. We want people to be free, and we want equality, and we want to unite with all our brothers and sisters. And we want solidarity. We want to work together, and we want to serve one another. And we want peace. And we want harmony, and we want justice. And all that. So that's why we study Marxism.